Welcome, innovators, business owners, entrepreneurs, technology experts, academia, government R&D communities, and members of the North Carolina innovation ecosystem. This is Defense Technology Talks, hosted by the North Carolina Defense Technology Transition Office, or NC DefTech. This podcast will showcase various technologies with local and national experts who aim to solve complex national security problems. In the coming weeks, we will highlight North Carolinians with the potential to, or those that have positively contributed to enhancing the capabilities of our warfighters, law enforcement, and first responders. We will also feature government leaders in research and development who have helped shape the future in this domain. These podcasts are just one of the many free services provided by the North Carolina government to assist the North Carolina innovation ecosystem to thrive and provide solutions to our nation.
Okay, well, thanks, Bob, and thanks, everybody, for joining us this morning. For those of you who have been with us in the past, you know we've been talking a lot about this thing called SBIRs. We've had the Army brief. We've had the Air Force talk to us about AFWERX. The Navy was talked with us a couple weeks ago. We've had SOF talk with us. We wanted the Army Medical Research and Development Center to talk to us, but it kind of got confusing because there's this new thing called the Defense Health Agency. And I'm not exactly sure how they all play together. So we were fortunate enough to make a call and get Miss Colleen Gibney to come and talk with us this morning. Colleen has served as the Medical Research and Development Center, SBIR, Deputy Project Manager for 6 years. This office facilitates Defense Health Agency and Army Medical, SBIR, and STTR efforts in partnership with DoD's acquisition stakeholders. Prior to this role, Colleen supported MRDC's SBIR small business performers as a technical assistance advocate. And before coming to MRDC, she served as the SBIR Program Director for New York State's National Institute of Standards and Technology Manufacturing Extension Partnership Center for New York City. Its mission is to enhance the productivity and technological performance of U.S. manufacturing. Colleen was also the project manager for the National Science Foundation Partnerships for Innovation at the City University of New York Institute for Software Design and Development. And she has been part of also the effort to promote collaborative innovation through America's Seed Fund since 2004. So she has a lot of experience, and we really appreciate her taking the time this morning to talk with us. And we look forward to her presentation and to all your questions afterwards. With that, Colleen, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be with you. I really enjoy these smaller conversations. I really enjoy these conversations. They tend to be a bit more in-depth and informal. Last week, I spoke down in San Antonio at the Military Medical Industry Day they hold there. By the way, all the materials for that event are up online and could be useful to your folks. Although I loved it and I got to talk to a lot of companies and I really enjoyed that event tremendously, I note that the government flew me down there to talk for 10 minutes, right? So when I do these types of events, you're able to produce more information and hopefully be helpful to a very targeted group. So I think both are very important. I have learned to really enjoy this type of programming as well. So we're going to go through the first several slides quickly just to show you what is in this, because I designed this mostly as a handout. And to Denny's point, it is a little confusing how the Army and the Defense Health Agency and the Navy and the Air Force, how we're all going to play together on medical capabilities. Now, I did not make it a point of this presentation to move through legislative language around how we will be moving to the Defense Health Agency, but basically several pieces of legislation have centralized all medical capabilities for the operator to the Defense Health Agency over the next year or two. The hospitals have already moved. So if you were aware of an Army or Navy medical center, it is no longer that. It is technically a Defense Health Agency medical center and has been for a couple of years. So that's the bulk of the DHA. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go. So we're going to roll pretty quickly through the first several slides. I'm going to pause on a few just to show you where we are. So you can keep going. And you'll note that I have got some little yellow bumper stickers at the bottoms of some of these slides, and I've left in all the ugly HTML because they don't always work when you transfer them, just so that you have that if you don't have it. And you know the program. Next, we did hit 40 years old last summer. The STTR program, 10 years younger, so it hit 30 years last summer. And I think you're familiar with the basics of SBIR and STTR. But here are the percentages, and if you have eligibility questions, I've included a link toward the bottom. All right, I'm going to pause here for a second, because particularly since we were just talking about Soft Week, which I did not go to, but many of my colleagues did from other agencies. And in fact, our DoD PM call yesterday was hosted down there. So that means you met lots of folks, probably, Denny, besides just the Army was down there, but also Miss Sellis was down there from OUSD R&E, I believe, and many others. And I will have to let Mina Khalil at SOCOM know that you enjoyed the small business programming, because I know his team has been working so hard on that. I wanted to mark a few agencies in purple. This is the list of federal agencies. So if you're a medical focused performer, you may be focused upon the Health and Human Services, NIH, particularly CDC. That's very much the largest source of medical small business innovation research, small business technology transfer. And DoD at this level is a component. It is the largest component, but not medical is not the largest. So if you're looking at total size, Health and Human Services has more medical funding than DoD does, but DHA is the largest source of medical funding within DoD. So next slide will show that a bit. Okay, so this is the list of DoD components. And currently, and some of them, have changing names and moving back and forth under each other. And we do work with all of them. In particularly, SOCOM, as you mentioned, does have some medical interests. And we have partnered with them through our command's product managers, particularly on veterinary technologies for military working dogs, which is not always a core area for our program. We have run things through Army SBIR on it, but we now do pay attention as it is a focus of part of the Defense Health Agency. It's important to look at this list because there are changes, but with changes, sometimes there are outliers. So while I will tell you that most of what we'll talk about is the Defense Health Agency, you should, when you are on DSIP and you're looking at the broad agency announcement, you should not skip these other areas, right? If you're in an area where chem biodefense is of interest, we're not going to fund that under DHA at present, because of the statutory lines between the Army and operational medicine and chem biodefense. Now, I do think the new biodefense strategy that will be coming out could impact this. So we may see more changes and more of a holistic approach. But until then, I think it's just safest for small businesses to look at everything, because you just never know. I know I'm going to get questions about the Air Force and AFWorks because they have funded quite a bit of medical technology. And I'm happy to take questions and answers about that. I will say that some of the technology they have funded is at a higher role of care. We'll talk about what that means. And sometimes geared towards the hospitals or to health information technology. And those are no longer areas that you will have a program of record in at all. So if you're going to go after that type of strategy, ensure that you have a civilian market customer waiting in line, because it is very unlikely that you will get a first customer in time to really reap a StratFi or TACFi or this kind of funding the way the AFWorks program is designed. All right, this is true pretty much throughout DoD, but you also know that we have outliers here too. So we have the basic 23.1, 2, 3, A, B, C. What is this .4? And maybe you heard this from my colleagues in the DoD, but why can .4 appear all over the year? What's going on with that? Well, .4 is the general name given to our open cycles. And at DHA, we have just started running open cycles. Usually there is a reason. It is a particular type of direct to phase 2, or it is something with a special emphasis. We had one earlier this spring. It is closed, and I would expect to see a few more. We have slowed them down in anticipation of some of the new security apparatus that has to go around proposals that we will talk about later in the presentation. But this should be fairly familiar, but if it's not, you really need to make sure you are on the DSIP, DSIP, email list, and you're being notified of every single pre-release. Pre-release is a time when you can talk to the topic author. At DHA, we are usually going to ask that be kept to email. The complexity of medical technology means that we really want to make sure you get clear answers and that we have a record of those answers as well. And after the opening, you can, of course, post questions in topic Q&A, which some of us still call CITUS. I want to take a couple of minutes to talk about the Defense Health Agency, and I'm happy to take questions on this now or afterwards as well. It is it's more complex than we can go over fully, but from an SBIR perspective, not very much is expected to change. We have really been under the guidance of the Defense Health Agency since the beginning of the program in 2012. And actually, the program informally existed before that time as Office of Secretary of Defense Health Affairs budgeted money. When the DHA was stood up around 2012, is that right? Yes. At that time, they instantiated the program a bit more formally. Our office was already managing it. But at this time, when you see metrics, that's when it will start from, is that date. And what is DHA? It is a combat support agency. So MRDC is a command. It is a command of Army Futures Command at this time. It actually moved in the last few years, if you're tracking on a bingo card, it moved from MedCom. Then when some of the initial legislation came up and they had to make decisions, it moved to Army Materiel Command. They wanted to figure out how to parse our logistics area. Medical was more pre-collaborated than some of the other traditional Army areas, which had its centers or PEOs under RDECOM and their PEOs, right? So they had their S&T and their advanced development or product management. MRDC which was MRMC at that time, has always been a little more across the line. And that has to do very much with the nature of medical technology development and also FDA regulatory processes, So we went from Army Materiel Command to Army Futures Command, where MRDC is still, that's where we live right now. But most of our programs of record are funded by the Defense Health Agency. There are some exceptions to that, and we still do help and assist our past Army topics because the funding has already moved in the POM, and that affects our internal assessments that create our program budgets. In essence, I would not expect to see new Army SBIR or STTR topics that come from our office. All Army requirements would be channeled to the DHA program, as would Navy or Air Force medical requirements that have been registered. And the three areas that the DHA-SBIR-STTR focuses on and has focused on for a long time, what I will say is if you understand how acquisition funding works, you've got your 6.1 through 6.3 dollars, and then you've got your 6.4 after milestone B and going up. Even if you're not a program of record, we still split things out that way. So that funding, for the most part, has been moved to DHA in the POM for the Army R&D areas. Now, there are a couple exceptions. There are a couple of groups that might move back and forth. This does not affect the requirements developers. This does not affect logistics. So if Army Applied Program wanted to put out something specific to medical logistics, that section will stay under Army Materiel Command, and they could do that if they wanted. There's no rules against them running what they want to run. What I'm saying is that the tri-services and more are very coordinated in certain areas. For example, you think, SOCOM can run their own topics, and they do. Their operators have slightly different use cases. But if there is a combat casualty care IPR or 5000.2 meeting at MRDC headquarters under DHA, SOCOM will be at the table. There is nobody left out of the table, and there are none of these parties being ignored. And if you think about it practically, where do we get the ability to create medical requirements in the DoD? It's Title 10, right? And Title 10 gives the surgeons general the ability to equip their workforces, their warfighters. So requirements will continue to be generated by the services. And in SBIR, quite frankly, we do pre-requirements sometimes. I say requirements, that when the government talks about requirements, we can mean a big R, we can mean a little r, we can mean a lot of things, and that can be confusing. But in this case, if a need has been backed up, it could be a next generation need. And I will say that DHA considers itself a lower technology readiness level higher risk program, a little bit more along the lines of DARPA than along the lines of where Army Applied has kind of moved to. And so that's our budget. Our budget for this year, which we have not received yet, which can be interesting, is about $80 million we expect total between the two. So within DoD, that puts us as a mid-size fourth estate component, a little bit smaller than DARPA, but kind of in the DARPA category. All right, I'll pause here for a moment because all of the funding programs have different ways that they manage what the SBIR policy directive determines is the way to do this. What we tend to run is the maximum on phase one. I realize right now that maximum could increase, but here's something interesting. If we increase that amount right this second, we start getting animal studies in phase one. We don't want animal studies in phase one. Phase one is 6 months. It could take you almost that long to get your IRB approval. So we do not want that. We want everything quick. Something that's not on this slide, but I like to tell people, we work so hard at DHA to close the gap between phase one and phase two that you are likely to get your notification if you are a phase one performer at month 5. And once in a while we get concerns, well, we're not done with the project yet. We know, but you should be on track. I mean, you shouldn't be doing all the work in the last month either. So, let's get it going. Let's try to short times one and phase two, so you don't have to lay off too many scientists. That's our interest, right? We want to keep it moving. Get to phase two, prototype development. That has just gone up to 1.3 million. Now, during phase one and phase two, we provide a technical assistance advocate. That's what I used to do when I was a support contractor. And they provide commercialization readiness assistance. Right now, our TAA is Mr. Harvey McGee, who is very experienced. He was at MRDC Tatric for many years and came back to us to perform this function. And he will help at phase one to say, hey, how are you doing your commercialization planning? Here's some templates. How do you think about this? Now, we start our quad chart process at phase two with a formal quad chart and kind of coaching back and forth on, is this giving what we want? If you remember an inventor who ran the Eureka Ranch called Doug Hall, he always talked to us at the MEP about problem, promise, and proof. Those are Deming-like concepts, but they need to be in all of our quad charts. Problem, promise, and proof. And that I'm a stickler for that. I see almost every quad chart once there's a funding opportunity in front of it. And I have had companies ask why we're pushing back so hard. But I want that quad chart to represent such a visual impact for the reader. I realize that like other DoD agencies, our S&T leadership and our product development folks, they do not have a ton of time left over after their workday. So I need them to understand things really quickly in the form of a quad chart. But during that phase two, if funding is received from outside, phase three funding, and we are very generous with our explanation of phase three funding, but it must be specific to that actual innovation. At that time, we will match that 1-to-1 up to, I guess I've got it blocked, but it's now, I think it's 650. It just went up because the policy directive allows us to increase the phase two amount by up to 50%. We use that for our commercialization readiness program, which is called a phase two enhancement. I should mention it's not on here and we don't have an external program yet. We do sometimes use the sequential phase two mechanism. Right now, it is primarily at the pull of the advanced developer customer. We are talking about whether there will be an external program as well. This has not been determined. We would announce it if there was. Phase three commercialization, although it's not really covered in this presentation, one major source of phase three recently has been the congressionally directed medical research programs, CDMRP. If you are a medical related company and you are not tracking CDMRP funding, particularly the Joint Warfighters program, those are grants that you should really be on top of. And that is year to year money. Congress determines every year what topics will be covered. And it is like an NIH within MRDC. They run study sections, often having university partners a good idea. But I always encourage folks to look at that as well as other opportunities. There is also, you may have heard of our OTA, which is MTEC, MTEC, and that is the Medical Technologies Enterprise Consortium. We would not tell you to become a member. we would just say to monitor the opportunities and see if it's something that makes sense for you as a small business. Any questions on this slide? Because this is an important one before we move on. Oh, CDMRP.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you just Google CDMRP, it will come up.
Okay.
I may have it later in this presentation, but I think this version doesn't have it because I'm usually paneling next to CDMRP. Oh, great. And if you go to the military, if you Google Military Medical Industry Days, San Antonio 23, it'll come up from a company called Velocity, hired by the city of San Antonio. That entire slide set, it's like 250 slides, is on there. And one portion is from my colleagues at CDMRP talking about their funding programs.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this slide before we move on? Okay, great. Let's move forward. Couple things happening you may have heard from my colleagues at DoD. What I am spending 80% of my time right now is we were so happy to be extended with the SBIR and STTR Extension Act of 2022. We're grateful for the Congress for extending it. As many of you know, it did come down to a quite late moment, and there are always outcomes and new features from these programs. So there will be a new disclosure form. It actually is in public comment, I believe, through a new policy directive. And it will be in the new broad agency announcement if it's not already. So all I can really say about the disclosure form and how that process is working is be really careful about what you say. Make sure it is absolutely, absolutely accurate. This is not a form that an SBIR office will just check and say, yes, that looks good, and pass on. That is not what's going to happen here. So when we're talking about foreign control and ownership and pieces that are related, as you know, government-wide, you are going to see increases in how this is looked at. But with NSBIR, DoD is going to run a specific type of process, and there will be training available. It will be rolled out, but this new disclosure form process goes very live in June. So you need to be aware of it. If you are confused about your form and how to fill it out, then you need to get some advice, whether that's from DefTech or an SBIR party or SBA or an accountant. Make sure that you are accurate because your information is going to be validated. I just want to say that it's tough to be a small business, and sometimes you think this won't really matter. I just need to get this in tomorrow. This really matters. Okay. As we know, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification 2.0 is going to hit the whole system, and it kind of went back into rulemaking, but we think it could get finalized over the summer. And if I'm sure when my Air Force colleagues were on, they talked about the Blue Cyber Education Series. Now that's not going to get you everywhere for CMMC, but it will at least get you extremely literate into the kind of expectations that the risk management framework and the Defense Industrial Board folks are looking at having. So, and if you haven't been on and Ask Me Anything with Kelly Kiernan at the Air Force, you should follow her on LinkedIn. She's amazing. She's just done tremendous work. DHA is not going to try to duplicate what's happening there, but we are concerned. We're aware that the costs of CMMC for small businesses are the same as if you were Lockheed Martin, and, in some ways, and that this is very, very challenging. So we just ask that you be aware of it. It's not something our office can really impact, but it is rolling out. Next slide, please. Just a few events in case you're tracking. Bio is coming up. I will be there. Bio tends to be more about large primes, and I don't see as many small businesses. I'm sure there will be small businesses there. I will be at an MRDC larger pavilion. So sometimes it's more that SBIR is part of the mix there. I do keep an eye out for primes who might want to do business with our SBIRs so that they have awareness and introductions can be made. But that's up in Boston, so if anyone's traveling up there. Tech Connect World 2023 in National Harbor, that is coming up. I will be there as well. I think Tech Connect, I personally liked it when they had one-on-one meetings all day for 2 or 3 days, and that's what I would do, is just meet with companies. I prefer that. This is a little bit more informal now. I'm sure that the talks are good. I will be giving a shorter version of this at one point. I would say it sounds to me like the audience on this call is a bit more 201, 301. And my impression of Tech Connect is that it has the most impact for 101 level companies. And here's a gap that we work with a lot at DHA. And I think every single company is super smart. So I'm not getting on anyone's smartness. But this is a difficult program, and some companies have spent a lot of time trying to understand it. And then they get frustrated if they go to things and hear, this is an SBIR, right? They're looking for something a little bit more in-depth and tactical. Now, for in-depth and technical, if you are a military health company, or if you are interested in that topic, particularly combat casualty care, the MHSRS Military Health System Research Symposium is our flagship massive event every year. Now, I wish I could tell you what the date is. The date comes out every June for August. Last year was October, but that was an outlier. They have to wait until they have contracted with the vendor. But so what you do is you go to the website here and you sign up for notification. The minute the notification happens, then you rush to register and get your hotel. It is probably going to be in the Gaylord Kissimmee again, but they will fill up all of the local Marriotts also as part of that. So keep an eye out. Now, if you're not sure this is the year for you, but you're working on something medical, maybe it's an SBIR, maybe it's not, around January is when you should be submitting an abstract to this conference. And that can be for a talk or for a poster. I really liked what you were saying about Soft Week and how they were very solicitous to the small businesses, which is a goal for us as well. I personally haven't made it to AUSA. It wasn't medical enough, and I didn't think there was enough small business, but our colleagues certainly have gone. MHSRS, I can promise you a couple of things about it. It is a heavy, heavy research conference. It is more of a research conference than a buyer conference, even though the expo hall does get full and there are companies there and the product managers are all there. But remember, our product management numbers for DHA, Army, for all of it, we are very tiny compared to other parts of the DoD, right? So there isn't always a lot of money to sustain a capability. Most of the time, we're asking companies for SBIR and other technologies to be commercially viable and militarily relevant, sometimes in that order, because we need evidence that you can keep going, even though maybe we can't actually fund you all of the way, right? So MHSRS is a great place to meet people. It is the largest S&T research conference in the DoD. And what I can promise you we will do is at DHA-SBIR for the department, we sit over with our DHA colleagues. We have a little booth area. And we also expect some programming. We usually do at least one panel. But what we do is we actually concierge a bit. We show, and we're agnostic about which SBIR program. If you come from an SBIR program and you have a capability, we'll give you a little SBIR, SBA type sticker for your poster. It's clear. We will walk you over to folks that we think might be relevant for you to meet. We will sign you up for one-on-ones when there's someone specific you want to see, and kind of try to track and make sure you're having a good conference. So we sometimes get up to 250 small businesses. That's dwarfs the conference is much larger than that, but those are pretty specific targeted small businesses for us. So I do think if you're looking to dip your toe in and you're a combat casualty care type person, take a look at it. And if you go to the website, you can actually see past conferences, posters, presentations. You can probably see our SBIR presentation from last year. And you can also kind of get a sense, is this for you? How much, combat casualty care images are you good at watching? There's it's a hardcore conference for serious folks who are trying to solve problems for the medic that you don't always have in the commercial medical market. Okay. And we don't know if there'll be an SBA New England Road Tour, but that won't affect North Carolina much anyway. But if it happens, we could consider it. I think you guys are probably hooked up with most of these, but I have just put these links in. I think you probably know also that the PTACs have been changed to Apex accelerators. And I do think for those who haven't used any of these sources or haven't used NIST MEP centers to talk about future manufacturing and beginning with the end in mind, and export and all of those things, that it's always a good time to build those relationships. I just really like this quote. You might have seen it from my colleagues. This was from a kind of a letter last summer during the reauthorization. And the SBIR-STTR programs play a vital role in enabling the U.S. to maintain technological dominance and provide the innovation to allow the U.S. to remain ahead of our adversaries. And medical technologies are very much part of that. It's not within the purview of this particular brief to kind of go through what those are and how they save lives. But very much one thing I noted, Denny, when you guys were talking about some of the technologies, SoftWorks and SOCOM are looking at kind of push some of the decision making to a lower level on the battlefield. And that is exactly what is happening in medical technology. If you think about the SOCOM model for medics, that is where multi-domain operations and similar paradigms are moving us for future combat. So a lot of the technologies we get involved with have to do with empowering decision makers, possibly sometimes before there is a medic on the scene, because we will be having smaller groups in more austere places under the tyranny of distance. There will not be this, flight to Langstuhl and then they're fine. We are looking at, there is no golden hour. Okay. There is a golden period of time, and we want to try to make that better. And everyone is very involved with that in our enterprise. Next slide, please. And I will say the military health system incorporates DHA, Army, Navy, Air Force, SOCOM, everybody. A couple of quick proposal writing tips similar to what you were going over in the last call, but these are just from me personally. Make sure you understand the military medical capability gap, and you probably need to be better, faster, and cheaper. I had a little argument with the company last week at San Antonio, and they said, well, mine is so much better, but it's not going to be cheaper. It's going to be a lot more expensive. And I said, that's great. I think your technology is awesome. Nobody's going to look at it. Let's go back to the drawing line and see, is there something you can swap out? What if you can satisfy something instead of getting, are you gold plating? What can we look at? Is it a volume question? These are issues. They are not going to field something that is more expensive in most cases unless it is absolutely getting people back into the battle quicker. If you can prove that you are getting someone back into the battle quicker, maybe, but usually better, faster, and cheaper. Okay. And you don't have to worry about this at your phase one, but keep it in mind when you're doing your architecture of your product. No reason to wait for a BA topic or a launch to build your proposal team. This is the time to make collaborations. What if you start out with someone and then you can't stand them? That doesn't go well. So it's a good time to, and also STTR applications and SBIR universities can come into a certain percentage of those also. Those are a great low risk place to build amazing relationships with your research institutions and see, what's your future together with them beyond this project. Commercial market problem. It is not enough. Sometimes our topics are really specific and you can't even picture, like, my goodness. And I do see there's a question. I'll get to that after this one. My goodness, what is the commercial market problem? If there is not one, A, we messed up as topic writers, so that's possible. But B, if you do not think there is a business reason to solve that problem, maybe don't answer that one, honestly, for the good of your business. I see there's a hand up from Alex.
And
Hi, so
Alex, if you can go ahead.
A lot of end up in, say, SBIR, STTR loop, where they, do have that problem if they don't have the commercial customer or exit. Is the MHSRS or other events appropriate for companies that have already gone through SBIR but are looking to match and do the follow-on with the customer on the other side?
I hate to say it depends, but I want to give a narrow definition of who a customer is, okay? For the most part, a customer is someone with 6.4 money who is working in a program of record that's already been planned out for 4 years. And the amount of money in the 6.4 bucket is small. So yes, you can, but I would say MHSRS is better if you want to go and learn more about the specifics of the capability so you can be more specific and answer the mail better if an RFI actually comes out for a related program of record. But I would say that for 60 to 70% of the SBIRs in our catalog, no program of record will be established. They will be expected to go to the commercial marketplace and be bought back later. And a phase one effort, you guys know this, you're not beginners, is not a book report. I never really want to see that thing where people are like, we are going to research these 50 things and come back with a hypothesis. We really do expect that to have been done by the time you're writing a proposal. We want a thing. We want a breadboard. We want squishy stuff in a lab that meets the needs of the topic. We don't care if it's high risk. We can accept a lot of risk. Next slide, please. And I think we're there. That's the thank you slide, and I'm open for additional questions. And Alex, I hope that answered. I think it's a good place to get immersed in that culture. I would never say that you go there and then someone will find palm money for you, because we are in an extremely fiscally constrained environment.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Defense Technology Talks, hosted by the North Carolina Defense Technology Transition Office, or DefTech. The views expressed in this broadcast are solely those of the individual contributors. As indicated, DefTech does not take responsibility for those statements or opinions and accepts no responsibility or liability for any inaccuracy or omissions reported during this program. The content and interviews are fair use for instructional purposes and to build awareness for the North Carolina innovation ecosystem. The full version of this presentation has been uploaded to our Mobilize platform. Mobilize is just another free service provided to you to access more national security and business collaboration opportunities. You can sign up for more information at deftech.nc.gov. Join us soon for the next podcast coming to a platform near you. DefTech is a subsidiary of the North Carolina Military Business Center and receives its support from Fayetteville Technical Community College.